My name is Robert Chen, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered that my wife of 12 years had been systematically stealing my inheritance money while pretending to invest it for our future. This is the story of the most calculated financial betrayal I've ever experienced, and how I turned the tables on her completely. I'm 42 years old, working as a senior accountant for a mid-sized firm in Phoenix, Arizona. For 12 years, I thought I had a solid marriage with Linda Chin, a real estate agent who seemed dedicated to building our financial future together. We lived a comfortable middle-class life in a nice suburban neighborhood. I made about $85,000 a year. Linda's real estate commissions were unpredictable, but averaged around $60,000 annually. We weren't wealthy, but we were financially stable and planning for retirement. Linda was always the one who handled our investments and long-term financial planning. She claimed to have a better understanding of real estate markets and investment opportunities than I did. As an accountant, I focused on our day-to-day finances and taxes, while Linda managed what she called our wealth-building strategy. In 2019, my father passed away and left me an inheritance of $380,000. It was money he'd saved over decades of working as a mechanic, living frugally and investing wisely. The inheritance represented his life's work and his hope that I'd use it to secure my family's future. Linda was incredibly supportive during the difficult time after my father's death. She helped with funeral arrangements, supported me emotionally, and suggested that we should invest the inheritance money strategically to honor my father's memory and create long-term wealth for our family. I trusted her completely and agreed to let her handle investing the inheritance money along with our other savings. That decision would prove to be the biggest mistake of my life. Linda presented me with what seemed like a comprehensive investment plan for my father's inheritance. She'd researched various real estate investment opportunities, stock portfolios, and what she called alternative investments that could provide better returns than traditional savings accounts. Her plan involved diversifying the money across several different investment vehicles: $150,000 in real estate investment trusts, REITs, $100,000 in a managed stock portfolio, $80,000 in what she described as private real estate deals, $50,000 kept liquid for emergencies. Linda showed me official-looking documents, investment prospectuses, and projected return calculations that suggested we could double the inheritance money within 5 to 7 years. She explained that because these were sophisticated investments, she'd need to manage them through her business connections in real estate and finance. She'd handle all the paperwork, monitor the performance, and provide me with quarterly reports on how our investments were performing. I was impressed by her thoroughness and grateful that she was willing to take on the complex work of managing these investments. As an accountant, I understood basic financial principles, but Linda seemed to have access to opportunities that I wouldn't know how to evaluate or access myself. Over the first year, Linda provided me with quarterly statements showing steady growth in our investment portfolio. According to her reports, we were earning about 8 to 10% annual returns, which seemed reasonable and encouraging. But I was about to discover that none of these investments actually existed. The first red flag appeared in late 2020 when I was preparing our tax returns. As an accountant, I'm meticulous about documentation, and I needed to report any investment income from the inheritance money. When I asked Linda for the tax documents from our various investments, 1,099 forms, partnership statements, dividend reports, she became evasive. She claimed that some of the investments were structured in ways that delayed tax reporting and that other documents hadn't arrived yet from the management companies. This seemed unusual to me. In my professional experience, investment income typically generates clear tax documentation, regardless of how sophisticated or complex the investment structure might be. Linda assured me that she'd follow up with the investment managers and get me the necessary documents. She suggested that we file for an extension to give the management companies more time to send the required paperwork. We filed for the extension, but the tax documents never arrived. When I asked Linda about this, she became irritated and accused me of not trusting her expertise. She said that questioning her investment management was undermining our partnership and showing disrespect for the work she was doing to build our wealth. I backed down, not wanting to create conflict in our marriage. But privately, I began to feel uneasy about the lack of documentation for investments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Throughout 2021, my concerns about our investments continued to grow. Linda's quarterly reports showed consistent positive returns, but I never saw any actual money from these investments flowing into our regular accounts. When I asked about accessing some of the investment returns to pay for home improvements or other expenses, Linda explained that the money was locked up in long-term investment vehicles that penalized early withdrawal. She said it would be financially irresponsible to touch the investments before they matured. But there were other inconsistencies that troubled me. Linda's real estate business seemed to be doing better than ever, but she was increasingly secretive about her clients and deals. She'd take phone calls in private, work late hours without clear explanations, and seemed to have more spending money than her reported commissions would suggest. In the fall of 2021, I decided to do some discreet research on my own. I wanted to verify the investment companies and funds that Linda claimed to be using for our portfolio. What I discovered was deeply disturbing. Using the investment account numbers and company names from Linda's quarterly reports, I began researching whether these investments actually existed. What I found was that several of the companies Linda claimed to be investing with either didn't exist or had no record of our accounts. The private real estate deals she described were supposedly managed by a company called Southwest Property Ventures. When I researched this company, I found a basic website with no real information and a phone number that went to a generic voicemail. The stock portfolio was supposedly managed by Chen Investment Services, which I realized was just Linda using her own name to create a fake investment company. Most damning of all, the REETs she claimed to have invested in were real companies, but when I called them directly, they had no record of any investments under our names or social security numbers. I was beginning to understand that the $380,000 inheritance from my father, money that represented his life's work and sacrifice, had been stolen by my own wife. But I needed to know where the money had actually gone before confronting Linda about what I discovered. As an accountant, I have skills in financial investigation that most people don't possess. I began analyzing our bank records, credit card statements, and financial transactions going back to when we'd received the inheritance money. The pattern that emerged was shocking in its audacity and systematic nature. Instead of investing the inheritance money as she'd claimed, Linda had been using it to fund a completely separate lifestyle that I knew nothing about. She'd opened secret bank accounts, made large cash withdrawals, and transferred money to accounts I couldn't trace. But more disturbing were the specific ways she'd been spending my father's money. $45,000 on luxury vacations that she'd taken alone, claiming they were real estate conferences, $38,000 on designer clothes and jewelry that I'd never seen her wear, $62,000 on what appeared to be rent or mortgage payments for a property I wasn't aware of, $85,000 in cash, withdrawals with no clear purpose, $67,000 transferred to an account belonging to someone named Marcus Rivera. The remaining money had been spent on various luxury items, expensive dinners, and other personal expenses that had nothing to do with investments or our shared financial goals. Linda hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd been using it to fund a secret life that I was completely excluded from. My investigation into Linda's secret spending led me to discover that her deception went far beyond just stealing my inheritance money. She'd been living a double life that was funded entirely by my father's money. The property she'd been paying rent on was a luxury condo in Scottsdale that she'd been using as a private retreat. According to the lease agreement I eventually found, she'd been renting this place since just after we received the inheritance money. The mysterious Marcus Rivera turned out to be her boyfriend, a personal trainer from the gym where she'd claimed to be taking fitness classes. She'd been supporting him financially with money stolen from my inheritance. Linda's real estate conferences were actually vacations she'd been taking with Marcus to expensive resorts and destinations around the country. Even her increased income from real estate wasn't real. She'd been using inheritance money to maintain the appearance of business success while actually spending full time managing her secret relationship and lifestyle. For over 2 years, Linda had been systematically stealing from me while lying to my face about investments, returns, and our financial future. She'd used my father's life savings to fund a relationship with another man. Before confronting Linda, I needed to build a comprehensive case that would protect me legally and financially. As an accountant, I understood the importance of documentation and evidence in financial fraud cases. I worked with a forensic accountant colleague to trace every dollar of the stolen inheritance money. We created detailed spreadsheets showing exactly how much had been taken, when it was taken, and where it had been spent. I also hired a private investigator to document Linda's relationship with Marcus Rivera and her use of the secret Scottsdale condo. The PI provided photographs, video evidence, and documentation of her double life. Most importantly, I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud within marriages. She explained that Linda's actions constituted both civil fraud and potentially criminal theft, depending on how aggressively I wanted to pursue the matter. The lawyer advised me to gather evidence of Linda's deception while continuing to act normally in our marriage. If Linda realized I was investigating her, she might destroy evidence or transfer remaining money to accounts I couldn't trace. For 3 months, I continued living with Linda while secretly building a case against her. Every day I came home knowing that the woman I'd been married to for 12 years had stolen my father's life savings to fund her affair with another man. It was the most difficult period of my life, but I was determined to seek justice for my father's memory and my own financial future. I chose to confront Linda on a Saturday morning in February 2022, exactly 3 years after my father's death. I wanted the timing to be symbolic. She'd had 3 years to steal from his memory, and now it was time for accountability. Linda was having coffee in our kitchen, probably planning another fake business trip that was actually a vacation with Marcus. I sat down across from her with a folder containing all the evidence I'd gathered. Linda, we need to talk about my father's inheritance money, I said calmly. She smiled and started giving me the usual update about how well our investments were performing. She claimed we'd gained another 12% in the past quarter and that we were ahead of schedule on our wealth building goals. I let her finish her lies, then opened the folder and placed the bank records on the table. These are the real records of where my father's money went, I said. The $45,000 you spent on vacations with Marcus. The $62,000 you've been paying for your secret apartment. The $85,000 in cash withdrawals. All of it. Linda's face went completely white. She tried to claim that I was misunderstanding the documents, that there were explanations for everything. I showed her the photographs of her with Marcus, the lease agreement for the Scottsdale condo, and the detailed forensic accounting of every stolen dollar. Linda, you've been stealing from me for 3 years. You used my father's life savings to fund your affair and your secret lifestyle. That money was supposed to secure our future, and instead you gave it to another man. Linda's initial response was to try to minimize what she'd done. She claimed that she'd been planning to pay back the money once her real estate business improved. She said the relationship with Marcus was a mistake, but that she'd never intended to permanently steal from me. When I pointed out that she'd spent nearly all of the $380,000 inheritance with no way to pay it back, she became defensive and angry. She accused me of being controlling with money and claimed that I'd never understood her financial sophistication. Linda tried to argue that the money she'd spent was investment in our relationship and that the Scottsdale condo was actually an asset that could be sold to recover some of the money. But when I showed her the lease agreement that proved she was only renting the condo, not buying it, her excuses collapsed completely. Finally, faced with overwhelming evidence, Linda admitted what she'd done, but instead of showing remorse, she tried to justify her actions by claiming that our marriage had been unsatisfying and that she deserved to find happiness elsewhere. She said that my father would have wanted her to be happy and that the inheritance money had simply provided her with the opportunity to discover what she really wanted in life. That statement, using my father's memory to justify stealing his life savings, was the moment I realized that Linda was beyond redemption. Within a week of confronting Linda, I filed for divorce and initiated legal action to recover the stolen inheritance money. My lawyer also contacted the district attorney's office to explore criminal charges for fraud and theft. The evidence was overwhelming. Linda had systematically stolen $380,000 over 3 years, used it to fund an extramarital affair, and lied about investments that never existed. She'd also committed tax fraud by not reporting the stolen money as income. Linda hired her own lawyer and initially tried to fight the charges, claiming that the money had been used for legitimate business purposes. But when faced with the forensic accounting evidence and documentation of her secret life with Marcus, her legal position became untenable. The criminal case moved quickly. Linda pled guilty to felony fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence and agreement to pay full restitution. She received 2 years in prison and was ordered to repay the $380,000 plus interest and legal fees. The divorce proceedings were equally swift. Because Linda had committed fraud against me during our marriage, she forfeited any claim to marital assets. I retained our house, retirement accounts, and other property. Getting back the stolen money proved more difficult than obtaining legal judgment. Linda had spent most of it, and Marcus Rivera had used his portion to pay off debts and make purchases that couldn't easily be recovered. However, Linda was forced to sell her Scottsdale condo lease, surrender her expensive jewelry and designer clothes, and liquidate her business assets. Between these recovered assets and garnishment of her future income, I eventually recovered about $180,000 of the original $380,000. It wasn't complete restitution, but it was enough to rebuild a foundation for my financial future. More importantly, Linda and Marcus both faced serious consequences for their actions. Linda served 18 months in prison before being released on parole. Marcus was charged as an accessory to fraud for knowingly accepting stolen money, and he received probation and community service. Both of them were required to continue making restitution payments until the full amount was recovered, which would take them years to complete. The financial betrayal was devastating, but the emotional betrayal was worse. For 3 years, Linda had looked me in the eye every day while systematically stealing my father's life savings. She'd used his memory and my trust to fund a relationship with another man. Recovery from that level of deception takes time and professional help. I worked with a therapist who specialized in financial abuse and relationship trauma. Through counseling, I learned to understand that Linda's actions reflected her character, not any failure on my part as a husband. I also learned valuable lessons about financial oversight within marriages. Even when you trust your spouse completely, It's important to maintain awareness of family finances and require documentation for major investments or financial decisions. No one should have unilateral control over significant amounts of money, regardless of their claimed expertise or good intentions. 2 years after Linda's arrest, I met Patricia Wong, a fellow accountant who understood the importance of financial transparency and honesty in relationships. Patricia had also experienced financial deception in a previous marriage, so we both brought hard-earned wisdom about trust and verification to our relationship. From the beginning, Patricia and I have maintained complete financial transparency. We share all account information, discuss every significant financial decision, and require mutual agreement on any investment over $1,000. It's a very different approach from the blind trust I'd placed in Linda, but it's built on mutual respect and shared responsibility rather than one person having complete control. Patricia also helped me honor my father's memory in a way that Linda had stolen from me. Together, we used the recovered inheritance money to establish a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing careers in skilled trades, the kind of work my father had dedicated his life to. People often ask me how I missed the signs of Linda's deception for so long. The answer is that skilled financial abusers are experts at exploiting trust and creating plausible explanations for suspicious activity. Linda used my love and respect for her to gain complete control over our family's most important financial decisions. She leveraged my grief over my father's death to position herself as the caring wife who would honor his memory through wise investments. Every time I had doubts or questions, Linda would frame my concerns as lack of trust in our marriage or disrespect for her expertise. She made me feel guilty for wanting documentation or transparency about investments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The key lesson I learned is that healthy relationships require accountability, not just trust. It's reasonable to expect documentation, regular updates, and mutual oversight of family finances, especially when significant amounts of money are involved. Anyone who resists that level of transparency probably has something to hide. Linda completed her prison sentence in 2024 and now lives in a different state, working a minimum wage job and making monthly restitution payments that will continue for years. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and she'll carry a felony conviction for the rest of her life. Marcus Rivera left Arizona shortly after his conviction, and according to mutual acquaintances, has struggled to maintain steady employment due to his criminal record. Neither of them destroyed my life the way they intended. Instead, their actions taught me valuable lessons about trust, verification, and the importance of financial oversight in relationships. The scholarship fund Patricia and I established in my father's memory has now helped 12 students pursue careers in skilled trades. It's growing every year and will continue to honor his legacy in a way that creates positive impact for future generations. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something better from the wreckage of what others tried to destroy. And sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. It's about ensuring that the victims can rebuild their lives stronger and wiser than before. That's how you handle discovering that your spouse has been systematically stealing your inheritance. You document everything, seek appropriate legal remedy, and then use the experience to build relationships based on transparency and mutual respect rather than blind trust. My father's money was stolen, but his values, hard work, honesty, and building something meaningful for the future, those couldn't be taken away. They became the foundation for everything I built afterward.